A gunshot split the Texas dawn, jolting Tabitha Vance right out of her sleep inside that rocking stagecoach. The coach lurched to a halt as the driver hollered about bandits, and her heart just about beat itself out of her chest. This was hardly the welcome to Texas she'd expected back in 1873. What do you reckon you would do in her boots? Let us know below, and be sure to subscribe so you see how this story turns out. The riders galloped off, but Tabitha couldn't shake the feeling that this whole journey was a bad omen. She had left Boston to become a governess for the children of a wealthy cattle baron, Silas Montgomery. It was her one chance to escape a past full of heartache and the tight-laced life of the city. But it turned out Mr. Montgomery had not told her the whole truth about the position. He had admitted, "It is not just the children who need a firm hand, Miss Vance. Well, my foreman, Russell Blackburn, is the meanest man in Texas, and he needs civilizing more than anyone." They said the man had a temper like a cornered grizzly bear, scaring off every decent person for 50 miles. A schoolteacher sent to tame a wild cowboy? Tabitha figured she must have been plumb crazy to agree to such a thing. The stagecoach finally rolled into Cottonwood Creek, a dusty town that looked like it was one strong wind away from blowing over. A friendly young fella named Charlie was there to fetch her, loading her things for the last 2-hour ride to the ranch. As he helped her onto the wagon seat, he gave her a curious look and asked, "Ma'am, what exactly did they tell you this job was about?" "My foreman, Russell Blackburn, is the best cattleman in Texas, but he's also the meanest. He's got a temper that scares folks off for 50 miles around. For the children's sake, that man needs to be civilized." Tabitha had stared, asking, "And you expect me to tame him?" Montgomery just smiled. He said if she could handle unruly Boston schoolboys, she could surely handle Blackburn. But bouncing in that coach, Tabitha worried she had made a terrible mistake. She was a teacher. She wasn't a miracle worker for some wild cowboy. The coach finally rolled into Cottonwood Creek. The town was just a dusty main street and a few shacks that a strong wind could flatten. Tabitha stepped down from the coach, feeling shaky on her feet. She squinted in the bright Texas sun. "Miss Vance?" a young man called to her. He was a friendly-looking fellow with freckles. "Yes, that's me. I'm Charlie. Mr. Montgomery sent me." He took her bags and loaded the wagon. "It's another 2 hours to the ranch, ma'am. I hope you ain't too tired." "I will manage," Tabitha said, though she was bone-tired. As Charlie helped her up, he gave her a curious look. "If you don't mind me asking, what brings you here?" "What brings a lady from Boston so far out here?" "I am the new governess for Mr. Montgomery's children," she said, smoothing her wrinkled dress. Charlie whistled low. "Well, bless your heart. Those two are little wildcats. You have your work cut out for you," he said as the wagon rolled on. "And then there is Blackburn." "Mr. Blackburn?" she asked, her voice steady. Charlie's friendly face soured. "He is not the kind of man a lady should talk about. Meaner than a cornered rattlesnake, that one. He has run off half the ranch hands. The other half are too scared to leave him. The only reason he is still foreman is because he is the best with cattle." "I see," Tabitha said quietly. A knot formed in her stomach. "There was another lady here before you," Charlie went on, "a Miss Prescott. She was supposed to teach the little ones, but she only lasted 2 weeks. She said she could not stand Blackburn's temper or his foul mouth." "And how many others have there been?" "You make number 5 this year alone," Charlie said, with a grin. Tabitha's throat went dry. She had faced trouble before. Her classroom in Boston was full of rough boys. They were rowdy and loud, but this felt different. This was not Boston. This was more than teaching children their manners. This was about dealing with a dangerous man. "Tell me about the children," she said, wanting to change the subject. "Emma is 8 and Billy is 6. Their mother, Mr. Montgomery's sister, passed from a fever last spring. Their daddy was lost in the war, so their uncle took them in. They are good kids, just a bit wild." The conversation changed as they rode along, with Charlie pointing out different landmarks. But Tabitha barely listened. Her mind was on what was waiting for her at the ranch. When they finally arrived, the Montgomery ranch house was grander than she had imagined. It was a big 2-story home with a wide porch that looked like an island of calm in the wildland. A few other buildings, a corral, and a bunkhouse stood nearby. As their wagon pulled up to the house, Tabitha saw 2 small children run out. They were hollering and running wild. The boy was barefoot with his shirt untucked. The girl's nice dress was now stained and torn, her dark braids coming loose. "Well, there are your students now," Charlie said with a big smile. Before she could say a word, the children saw the wagon and stopped cold. They stared at her with suspicious eyes. "Another one," the boy, Billy, said loudly. "Uncle Celis said she is from Boston," Emma replied, her eyes narrowed. "Boston ladies do not last long out here," Billy announced. Tabitha climbed down from the wagon all by herself. "I am not just some lady from Boston," she said firmly. "I'm Miss Vance, your new governess." The children glanced at each other, unimpressed. "The last one, Miss Prescott, left crying," Emma said. "Well, I do not cry easily," Tabitha replied, looking right at the girl. A loud commotion from the corral grabbed their attention. They heard angry shouts and a loud thud. "That'll be Blackburn," Charlie muttered quietly. He nodded toward the noise. "He's breaking in the new horses and the new ranch hands." Tabitha looked over. A magnificent black horse was bucking and kicking inside the corral. The rider on its back was a tall, broad-shouldered man who refused to be thrown. He moved with the horse perfectly, as if they were one. "Is that him?" she asked, her voice just a whisper. "No, ma'am," Charlie answered. "That's Miguel, our best rider. Blackburn is that big fella by the fence." Tabitha turned her gaze to the man with the red beard. His back was to them, but he was huge, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders like a bull. The way he stood there, it looked like he was angry with the whole world. As if he felt her stare, the man suddenly turned around. Their eyes met from across the yard. She felt a little jolt when she saw him. His face was hidden by his hat, but she could see a strong comb, a red-brown beard, and eyes that seemed to glow. They stood frozen for a second. Then he just turned his back on her, like she was nothing. Tabitha's face burned hot, partly from shame and partly from being mad. So that was Russell Blackburn, the man she was here to tame. He was about to find out that Tabitha Vance was not a woman you could just ignore. "Miss Vance," a voice called from the porch. Celis Montgomery walked down the steps, looking as clean and tidy as he had back in Boston. "Welcome to Montgomery Ranch. I see you've already met the children." "Yes, Mr. Montgomery," she said, forcing herself to look away from Blackburn's back. "We were just meeting." "Good," Bob Montgomery said, but his smile was all for show. "Charlie can take your things up. Children, help Miss Vance get settled, then show her the ranch. I have to head into town for business." With that, he was gone, climbing into a buggy. Tabitha watched him go, feeling left behind. "He's always busy," Emma told her softly. "Come on, your room is upstairs." The inside of the house was just as fancy, filled with things that clearly cost a lot of money, and Eastern comforts. Tabitha's room was nice and big, with a good-sized bed and a writing desk. A window gave her a clear view of the ranch yard and the corral, where Blackburn was still watching the riders. Emma told her, "Supper's at 6, as her trunk was set down. "Uncle Celis is gone, but Mr. Blackburn always eats with us." Tabitha's heart just sank. "Always," Billy chirped in. "He doesn't say much, but he sure does stare." Miss Prescott used to cry about it. "Well, that there will be no crying from me," Tabitha said with a firm voice, unpacking her things. The kids gave her a whirlwind tour, rushing her from one room to the next. They showed her the sunny schoolroom filled with all the books and maps she would need. Then they pulled her outside to see the stables, the chicken coop, and the little kitchen garden. "You best stay away from the bunkhouse," Emma warned as they walked past the long building. "Mr. Blackburn says it's no place for a lady." Tabitha just hummed, tucking that little fact away. As the sun started dipping low, a big bell rang out from the porch. "That's for supper," Billy yelled, already taken off for the house. Tabitha followed a little slower. She needed a moment to gather her nerve. She was about to meet Russell Blackburn face to face. She aimed to make a much better impression this time around. She changed into a simple blue dress and pinned her brown hair up neat and tidy. She knew how to carry herself with a bit of dignity. When she walked into the dining room, the children were already seated. The table was set for 4 people, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, was bringing in a big pot of stew. But there was no sign of Mr. Blackburn. "Where is Mr. Blackburn?" she asked. "Probably still washing the trail off," Mrs. Garcia replied. "That man is rough as a corn cob, but he's always clean for supper." Right on cue, the door swung open, and in strode Russell Blackburn, Up close, he was even bigger than he looked from a distance. He'd cleaned up, but you could still see the dust on his boots and a wildness in his eyes. His beard was trimmed neatly, framing a mouth that seemed stuck in a permanent frown. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were a startling, bright blue under his heavy brow. Those eyes sized her up and dismissed her all in one look. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low growl. "I hope you're planning to stick around longer than the last one." Before she could answer, he sat down. "I surely do, Mr. Blackburn," she answered, keeping her voice steady. He just grunted and grabbed a piece of bread. "That's what they all say?" Supper was a mighty uncomfortable affair. The children, usually so full of noise, were quiet as mice. Tabitha tried making small talk, but he just gave one-word answers, shooting nervous looks at the foreman. Blackburn, for his part, ate like a man who saw food as plain fuel, nothing more. He said nothing. Finally, Tabitha couldn't stand the silence. "Mr. Blackburn," she began, "I understand you have worked on the Montgomery Ranch for a good while." He looked up, his sharp blue eyes fixed on her. "5 years, and from a place you would not know." "Oh, I have traveled quite a bit, Mr. Blackburn." "You might be surprised," she said. He snorted. "I doubt that. Boston ladies do not go where I have been." "And where is that?" "The kind of place a decent woman should not know exists." He dared her to ask more. Tabitha did not take the bait. "I see. Well, I hope we can have a friendly working relationship. After all, we will be seeing a lot of each other." "Will we now?" he questioned. "Of course. I will be teaching the children daily." "Teaching them what?" he demanded, leaning closer. "How to talk fancy and pour tea. They do not need that out here in Texas. They need to know how to survive." "An education is survival, Mr. Blackburn," she shot back. "The world is changing. Children need to read, write, and handle numbers." "They can already do all of that," he cut in. "Emma is a whiz with figures, and Billy reads better than half my men." Tabitha blinked, surprised. This was not the uncivilized man she had expected. "Well, that is wonderful. But there is still history, geography, and science." "Science?" Billy piped up. "Like with experiments and explosions?" "Some science involves controlled reactions," Tabitha allowed. "But that is not all it is." "Can we blow something up tomorrow?" the boy asked, his eyes wide. "Absolutely not," Tabitha said firmly. "Why not?" Blackburn challenged her, the barest hint of a smile on his face for the first time. "Seems like a good, practical lesson to me." "Mr. Blackburn, I would thank you not to undermine me." Tabitha fought to keep her voice even and her composure intact. "Just offering my opinion on education, Miss Vance," he replied, the smile vanishing in an instant. "After all, Mr. Montgomery hired you partly on my recommendation." "Your recommendation?" she said, completely startled. "He showed me your letter. I said you sounded too proper to last a month out here. But at least you had dealt with boys not born with silver spoons." He pushed his chair back. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." With that, he was gone, leaving Tabitha staring after him, confused and annoyed. She had come here expecting to tame some wild man, but Russell Blackburn was far more complicated. He was rude and rough around the edges for sure, but there was a sharp mind behind those fierce eyes. And maybe something else too. Something hurt. "He is not always that nice," Emma said quietly, breaking the silence. "That was him being nice?" Tabitha asked in disbelief. The little girl simply nodded. "He did not even cuss. And he spoke to you for a whole minute. For Mr. Blackburn, that is practically a warm welcome." Tabitha thought, Lord have mercy. If that was him being friendly, this was going to be a tough job. That evening, getting the children ready for bed was a real chore. It involved a lot more chasing than she was used to. All the while, Tabitha kept glancing out the window. She watched the ranch yard below. She saw Mr. Blackburn moving from the house to the barn, giving out orders. He was checking on the animals as the sun went down. Even in the twilight, there was something about him that just pulled you in. She shook off the thought. She tucked the children into their beds, promising them real lessons in the morning. Back in her own room, she sat down at the little desk. She tried to write in her journal, but the words just were not there. How could she possibly describe a man like Russell Blackburn? He was a complicated fellow, mean as a snake for sure and mighty intimidating. but he was also smart and sharp-eyed. And if he really cared about his children's learning, maybe he was not the complete monster folks made him out to be. She closed her journal, not a single word written. She decided to wait and see. It was only her first day after all. There was still plenty of time to figure out this Russell Blackburn fella, or if he could be figured out at all. That first week flew by in a hurry. Tabitha got the children on a schedule. Lessons started right after breakfast and went on until noon. After that, they would head outside for some fresh air, learning practical things and having fun. She was surprised to find that Emma and Billy were smart kids. They were eager to learn when she wrangled their wild energy. She hardly ever saw Mr. Blackburn during the day. He was always out of the house before the sun came up. He would only come back for supper, which he ate without saying a word, and then he would be gone again. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of him from the window, walking across the yard or working cattle way out in the pasture. It was in those quiet moments, when she thought no one was watching, that she would study him. He moved with a grace you would not expect from a man his size. He was confident, like he belonged right there on that land. Whatever else he was, Russell Blackburn knew how to run a ranch. On her 8th day, Tabitha got an idea to shake things up. She wanted to take the learning outside the schoolroom. The weather was too nice and the kids were getting antsy after a long morning of numbers. "All right," she said, snapping the book shut. "Today, we are going to learn about botany." Billy squinted. "What in the world is that?" "It's the study of plants," she explained. "We will go collect some samples. We will find them right here on the ranch and figure out what they are." Emma was not convinced. "That sounds mighty dull." "Not a bit," Tabitha smiled. "It is like being a detective. Every single plant has its own secrets, its own little story. Some can be used for medicine, some you can eat. And knowing which plants are which is a mighty useful skill out here. Even the poisonous ones might just save your life." That surely got their attention. With bags and a guidebook, they started exploring the ranch. Tabitha was careful to stay clear of the working areas. She didn't want to bother the hands or face Blackburn before she was ready. Their nature walk was going just fine until Billy saw a strange plant down by the creek. "Hey, look here, Miss Vance," he yelled, already reaching out. "Hold on now." Tabitha rushed over, seeing the shiny leaves. "Don't you touch that, Billy. That's poison ivy. It'll make you itch something fierce," she warned. The boy just looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because I've studied plants," she said. "And I once had a student who didn't listen to me. He was a miserable mess for days." "The boy's right to ask," a deep voice rumbled from behind them. Tabitha turned and saw Blackburn on his horse, his face shadowed by his hat. "Excuse me?" she said, getting her back up. "I said he's right to question you." Blackburn swung down from his horse smooth as can be. "Out here, just taking someone's word can get you hurt. It's better to know for yourself." He knelt by the plant. "See these leaves, Billy? Leaves of 3, let it be. That's the rhyme to remember. See how they're shiny? That's another warning. Now look over here." He pointed to another plant nearby. "This one looks a bit like it, but the leaves are different. This one's harmless." Tabitha was mighty surprised by the sudden lesson. "Well, thank you for the extra instruction, Mr. Blackburn," she said a little stiffly. He looked up at her with those sharp blue eyes. "You don't know much about Texas plants, do you, Miss Vance?" "I am learning," she admitted. "My knowledge is mostly from books." To her surprise, he didn't make fun of her. Instead, he just nodded, like her honesty earned a little respect. "Book learning is a start, but out here knowing what's what keeps you safe." He stood up tall, making Tabitha look up. "If you're fixing to teach these children about the local plants, you ought to learn from someone who really knows them." "Are you offering, Mr. Blackburn?" she asked, shock plain in her voice. A little something sparked in his eyes, maybe amusement. "No, ma'am, but Mrs. Garcia knows every plant in a 50-mile circle. You go ask her." With that, he got back on his horse and rode off. Tabitha just stared, not sure if she was insulted or thankful for the advice. "Mr. Blackburn sure knows a lot," Emma said as they watched him leave. "He showed us which berries we can eat." "He did he?" Tabitha said quietly, tucking away that new fact about the foreman. Later that evening, she found Mrs. Garcia in the kitchen. The housekeeper was busy rolling out biscuit dough, her hands working like they had a mind of their own. "Mr. Blackburn suggested I speak with you about the local plants," Tabitha said. "The children and I were collecting samples, and I realized I don't know much. Mrs. Garcia looked up, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. He sent you to me, did he? She chuckled. Well now, that is something. Russell doesn't send just anybody my way. Only folks he thinks are worth teaching. You should take that as high praise, Miss Vance. So will you help me learn? Tabitha asked. I want to be better prepared. Of course, child. I've known these plants since I was a little girl. My grandmother was a healer, a curandera. She taught me everything. We can go out tomorrow morning before your lessons start. True to her word, the next morning, Mrs. Garcia showed Tabitha around the ranch. She pointed out what was good to eat, what was medicine, and what to steer clear of. Tabitha eagerly filled her notebook with notes and careful drawings. The children mentioned Mr. Blackburn also taught them about plants, Tabitha remarked. He knows a thing or two, Mrs. Garcia confirmed. That man has had a hard life. Do you know much about him? Tabitha asked, trying to sound casual about it. Mrs. Garcia gave her a shrewd look. Only what little he's told me. He fought in the war. He lost his family when he was young and drifted for years before settling here. Why the sudden interest? Just professional curiosity, Tabitha said a little too fast. Mr. Montgomery thinks I should soften his rough edges. Mrs. Garcia laughed at that. Good luck. Plenty have tried and failed. That man is who he is. I don't believe that, Tabitha countered. Anyone can change with the right push. And you reckon you are that push? I can certainly try, she said. Mrs. Garcia looked her over for a long moment and shrugged. You are not the first woman to try and tame him, but you might be the first he will listen to. Why would you say that? Because he watches you, the housekeeper said plainly, when you are with the children or just reading on the porch. He thinks no one sees it, but I do. He is curious about you, and that man does not waste his time on people he does not respect. Tabitha blushed. You must be mistaken. No, I do not think I am, Mrs. Garcia smiled. But time will tell, will it not? Later that day, feeling much more prepared, Tabitha took the children out again. This time she confidently identified the plants. She explained what each one was for, just like Mrs. Garcia had taught her. They were so focused on their task, they never saw the riders until they were right on top of them. Tabitha looked up to see Blackburn and his men riding back from checking the property line. The others just nodded as they passed, but Blackburn pulled his horse up beside her. Learning about the local plants, I see, he said, glancing at their collection bags. Yes, Mrs. Garcia was a wonderful help, Tabitha replied. Thank you for the suggestion. He tipped his head, then looked at the children. Find anything interesting? Billy and Emma eagerly showed him what they'd gathered, chattering away. Tabitha was surprised to see Blackburn listen so patiently, even adding a few facts. He was nothing like the grumpy, quiet man she saw at the dinner table each night. You are very good with them, she said after the kids ran ahead. His friendly expression vanished in an instant, like she had caught him doing something wrong. They are good kids, she added with a little dig. Just need handling, like your horses. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth turned up in a slight smile. Smarter than horses, more like wolf cubs. They'll be loyal, but you have to earn their trust. And how do you do that? She asked. His eyes met hers, and they were very direct. Children can spot a fake from 50 paces, he said. I am not a fake, Mr. Blackburn. He thought for a moment. No, I do not believe you are, but you are a long way from Boston. I am well aware of that, she answered, thinking just how different this life was. But sometimes being out of your element can be a good thing. That it can, he agreed with a flicker of respect in his eyes. You're doing better than the others did. Before she could even react to the compliment, he spurred his horse and rode away. Tabitha was left staring after him, completely surprised by their conversation. That night at dinner, she caught him watching her a couple of times. Mrs. Garcia's words came back to her. He's curious about you. The thought gave her a little thrill. The next 2 weeks settled into a comfortable routine of schoolwork and outdoor lessons. Silas Montgomery returned from his trip, stayed for a few days, and then left again. He seemed happy with her work. While he was home, Blackburn stayed away from the main house. They do not get along, Uncle Silas and Mr. Blackburn, Emma explained one afternoon. They were watching the foreman ride out right after Montgomery had returned. They argue a lot when they think we are not listening. About what? Tabitha asked. The little girl shrugged. Ranch stuff. Uncle Celis wants to sell more land, but Mr. Blackburn thinks it is a bad idea. He's always on about me and Billy, says we need proper manners for school in San Antonio, but Mr. Blackburn says this is where we belong. That was the first Tabitha heard of it. She turned to the girl. And what do you think, Emma? Do you want to go to San Antonio? No, ma'am, the girl said, her voice full of fire. I want to stay right here with Mr. Blackburn. And Mrs. Garcia and all the horses. The city girls just make fun of how I talk. That night, Tabitha carefully brought it up with Montgomery over their supper. Emma said you planned to send them away to school. I wasn't aware of that. Montgomery put his glass down, his face guarded. It is the next logical step for them. With all respect, sir, I think they're thriving here. They need what this ranch offers. They're bright kids learning so much. A big move might set them back. Miss Vance, Montgomery said, his voice turning cold as a norther, while I value your opinion, their education is my decision. I hired you to prepare them, not to question my judgment. Of course, Tabitha said quietly. I only thought that maybe another year here would better prepare them for the change. He studied her for a second. You've been talking to Blackburn, haven't you? No, sir, she answered truthfully. This is just what I've seen with my own eyes. But if Mr. Blackburn agrees, maybe there is something to it. Montgomery just scoffed. He knows cattle, not what children from a good family require to get ahead. The sooner they learn proper society, the better. That conversation left Tabitha troubled. She had a gut feeling this was more about his ambitions than the children's well-being, but she couldn't challenge him head-on. She would just have to be the best teacher she could, and she would find another way to fight for them. 2 days later, Montgomery left again. He was headed for Austin on business, and the whole ranch seemed to breathe easier. Blackburn was back at the supper table, and the children were their loud, happy selves. One evening, about a week after he'd gone, Tabitha sat on the porch, the kids were in bed, and she was just taking in the cool night air and all those stars. That big Texas sky still took her breath away. It was so different from Boston. Back home, all you saw was a tiny sliver of sky between buildings. She was so lost in thought, she never heard Blackburn's soft footsteps. Mind if I join you? Startled, she looked up to see him standing at the bottom of the steps. Of course not, she replied. She offered him a chair. He sat down, stretching his legs. They watched the stars in silence for a few minutes. A lot different from Boston, I reckon, he finally said. Yes, the city lights hide everything. This is incredible. I was 16 the first time I saw a sky like this. It made me feel small. Where was that? She asked. West Texas, on a cattle drive. She thought he was done, but his voice grew soft as he continued. I'd never been more than 10 miles from home. That sky taught me a lot. Is that what made you want to be a rancher? No, ma'am, he chuckled. It took the war, a lot of wandering, and some bad jobs to settle me. You probably do not want to hear it. Actually, I do, she insisted softly. He studied her in the dim light, then leaned back and decided to talk. He was a man of few words, but he spoke more openly than ever before. He told her he grew up in East Texas, the son of a blacksmith. He lost both his parents to typhoid when he was only 14. At 18, he had to join the army. It was volunteer or get drafted. I never believed in the cause, he stated plainly, but a man has to defend his home. The war hardened me. After the war, he drifted west, working as a cowhand and more. Even a town marshal once, he added. How did you end up here? Montgomery hired me 5 years ago to handle some rustlers. He offered me the foreman job. It felt like a good place to stop drifting. And what about the children? Blackburn fell quiet for a long moment. His voice was rough with emotion. Their father fought beside me in the war. Before he died, I promised I would look after his family. When their mother passed and they came here, they were just broken. They reminded me of myself at that age. It was hard to see. I did what I could. I taught them to ride and work with the animals. I showed them this land, hoping it would help them find their way back. His big hands gripped the chair. And they did. They are strong kids. You care a great deal for those children, she observed. Well, someone's got to, he said flatly. Montgomery just sees an obligation. He doesn't know a thing about what kids need, like sending them to that school in San Antonio. His head snapped up. He told you that? Emma let it slip. I only suggested they might benefit from another year right here. And how did he take that? Blackburn pressed, his voice low. He figured I had been influenced by you, she admitted. Said you know nothing about good families. Blackburn snorted. He thinks money and a fancy name are all that matter. Those kids need stability, Miss Vance. They need to know they belong somewhere. They need to build some confidence before the world tries to change them. The raw passion in his voice was a surprise to her. This was not the hard, unfeeling man she had been warned about at all. You are right, she said quietly. I will do what I can to help. I will try to convince Mr. Montgomery. Blackburn studied her, looking for any lie. He saw none and gave a single firm nod. I would appreciate that. The silence that followed was different. It was comfortable, a shared understanding. When she finally rose to go for the night, he stood up as well. It was a gesture of respect she had not expected. Good night, Mr. Blackburn. Russell, he said, if we are going to be allies, you ought to use my first name. The offer took her by surprise. Very well, Russell. You can call me Titha. The barest hint of a smile touched his lips. Good night, then, Titha. The sound of her name and his deep voice stayed with her up the stairs. Something had shifted tonight. A shared respect had formed between them. It was not quite friendship, but it was certainly a beginning. As she drifted to sleep, she realized she had not thought of Boston in days. Somehow this place, this Texas ranch, was starting to feel like home. The next day dawned hot and clear, another scorcher. Tabitha got up early for lessons. She found Billy and Emma already eating breakfast, with Mrs. Garcia watching over them. Noticing his empty chair, she asked, Where's Mr. Blackburn this morning? Rode out before sunrise, Mrs. Garcia answered, said not to hold supper for him. She felt a small sting of disappointment, but she quickly brushed it aside. Russell Blackburn was the ranch foreman, and he was all business, not one for social calls. The morning lessons went well. The children were actually paying attention. After lunch, Tabitha took them outside. They settled under the big oak tree for their history lesson. All right now, she started. Today, we are going to learn about the very first people to live on this land. The folks who were here long before any settlers ever showed up. You mean Indians? Billy asked, his eyes wide. That's right, Native Americans, Tabitha said gently. In this part of Texas, the main tribe was the Comanche. Mr. Blackburn says the Comanche were the best horsemen who ever lived, Emma added. Better than any cowboy. Reckon he would know, a slow voice drawled from behind them. Tabitha turned to see a tall, lean man with a sun-beaten face leaning on the tree. He had walked up without making a sound. It gave her a real start. I don't believe we've had the pleasure, she said, getting to her feet. Name's Tom Weaver, the man said with a nod. I'm the scout for this ranch, just got back from the northern line. His cold eyes looked her up and down, making her skin crawl. You must be the new teacher. I'm Miss Vance, she said, disliking him on the spot, but keeping her voice polite. Are you looking for Mr. Montgomery? No, ma'am, I'm looking for Blackburn. I've got news he needs to hear. He is in the north pasture with some men, checking on strays, Tabitha told him. Weaver's mouth twisted into a strange smile. Is that what he told folks? Mighty interesting. What do you mean by that? She asked. Nothing at all, ma'am, he said, but his tone said otherwise. It is just that I have been all over that north range, and I did not see hide nor hair of Blackburn. I'm sure there's a simple reason, Tabitha said, feeling unsettled. Perhaps they went to another section. Perhaps, Weaver said, not looking like he believed it. Well, when he does show, you tell him I need a word with him. It is urgent. With a tip of his hat that was more mocking than polite, he moseyed off. I do not like him, Emma said quietly. Mr. Blackburn does not like him either. Why is that? Tabitha asked, her curiosity piqued. I do not know. They argue sometimes. Mr. Blackburn told my Uncle Celis not to hire him. But Uncle Celis did it anyway. This was news to Tabitha, hinting at some tension on the ranch. She tucked that information away and tried to get back to the lesson. But after Weaver's visit, she found it hard to keep her mind on it. Russell was not back for supper that night, and he was still gone at breakfast the next morning. By noon, Tabitha felt a knot of worry in her stomach. She told herself she was being silly. Russell Blackburn was a capable man. He could certainly take care of himself. It was not strange for ranch work to keep him away overnight, but Tom Weaver's words kept playing in her mind. If Russell was not where he said he would be, then where had he gone? And why? Her worry grew when another day passed with no sign of Russell or his men. Even Mrs. Garcia seemed on edge, though she tried to hide it. Ranch work is just not predictable, the housekeeper explained to Tabitha. They could have run into trouble anywhere, a broken wagon or bad weather. But Mr. Weaver saw no sign of them, Tabitha argued. Mrs. Garcia's face hardened. I would not trust a word Tom Weaver says. On the third morning, the sound of horses woke Tabitha before sunrise. She ran to the window and felt a wave of relief seeing Russell dismount. But even in the dim light, she could tell something was terribly wrong. He was moving stiffly. She threw a robe on and rushed downstairs. When she got to the yard, Russell was giving orders to his men. His voice was tight with pain. Russell, she called out softly. He turned, a flicker of surprise on his face. Miss Vance, you are up early. I heard the horses, she said, then gasped when she saw him up close. His face was bruised and his shirt had dried blood on it. You are hurt. It is nothing, he said, wincing. Just a little disagreement. A disagreement with who? His eyes met hers, then darted away. It is handled. Clearly not, she shot back, forgetting she was in her nightclothes. You need a doctor to look at that. What I need is sleep, he grumbled, right after I report to Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery is not here, she reminded him. Then it can wait. Russell started for the bunkhouse, limping slightly. At least let Mrs. Garcia help you, Tabitha pleaded, following him. He stopped and turned. The morning light showed his deep exhaustion and pain. Why do you care, Miss Vance? Yes, he asked, his voice low. The question surprised her. Why did she care about this rough, difficult man? She saw something more in him, a good heart buried deep inside. Because you are a good man trying to do right by those children, she said, and because you are hurt and helping is the right thing to do. He just stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but not Mrs. Garcia. Then let me, she offered. I know a little bit about first aid. Face. Oh, is that right? I was a volunteer nurse during the war, she explained. I know how to clean a wound. He thought on it, then gave a nod. All right, but not out here. Meet me at the house in 10 minutes. I need to give the men their orders first. Sure enough, Russell appeared at the back door. He'd taken off his dusty coat and hat, but he still looked like he'd been through a storm. Tabitha had gathered some doctoring supplies from the kitchen in the meantime. She led him to a small sitting room. Sit down, she told him, pointing to a sturdy chair, and tell me where all you're hurt. Mostly my ribs, he admitted, lowering himself down carefully. Took a few shots to the face, too, as you can plainly see. What on earth happened? She asked, dabbing a wet cloth at the cut on his cheek. Russell paused, then made up his mind. We've had some trouble with rustlers on the north end of the property. Montgomery wanted to hire more guns. I thought that was just asking for a war. I figured I'd try a different way first. What way was that? Tabitha asked, gently wiping away the blood. Up close, his face looked a sight worse. I went to talk to the man I suspected. Russell winced as she cleaned. Fella by the name of Jasper Hall runs a small outfit north of us. He lost some land to Montgomery in a bad deal before the war. And I reckon that talk didn't go over too well, she asked with a touch of dryness. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not exactly, Halls wasn't hearing it. Said Montgomery cheated him, and he was just taking back what was his. So how did you wind up looking like this? Halls had friends. They jumped us when we were leaving. We handled them, but they got in a few good licks first. Tabitha finished with his face and looked at his side. I need to see those ribs, she said, trying to sound professional. Can you take off your shirt? He gave her a long look, then slowly unbuttoned the shirt. Tabitha let out a small gasp. His whole left side was a terrible patchwork of purple and black against his tan skin. That bad, is it? He asked, watching her reaction. It looks awfully painful, she said, getting a hold of herself. You need to be more careful. Those men could have killed you. It wouldn't be the first time somebody's tried, he said with a grim little smile. Tabitha started applying a salve to the bruises, her touch gentle but firm. He sat still as a stone under her care. You didn't tell Montgomery what you were planning, did you? She finally asked. No, he would have forbidden it. He wanted a big show of force instead. And is that so wrong? If these men are stealing cattle, it is more complicated than that, Russell interrupted. Holly reckons Montgomery got his land through some shady dealings. Starting a gunfight would just get people hurt. So you went in there by your lonesome? Tabitha said, wrapping a bandage tight around his ribs. That was either mighty brave or plain foolish. Reckon it was a little of both, he admitted. But I've seen what happens when folks start shooting over land. Nobody ever wins. She tied the knot. There, that should help some. You best take it easy for a few days. Russell just chuckled as he pulled his shirt on. Not much chance of that. This ranch don't run itself. Surely the other boys can manage? They could, he said, but a foreman has to be seen on his feet. It shows you're not beaten. She frowned. That's not strength. That's just being stubborn. Maybe so, Russell allowed, getting to his feet carefully. But it is the way of things out here. He looked down at her, a serious look in his eyes. Thank you for this, Titha. I surely do appreciate it. The sound of her name and his sincere voice made her heart flutter. You are welcome, Russell. They just stood there for a moment, a quiet understanding between them. Well, I ought to get to work, he said, turning for the door. At least get some breakfast in you first, Tabitha insisted. You must be starved. He paused, then gave a nod. All right, some breakfast sounds real good. As they walked to the kitchen, she knew something important had shifted between them. To everyone else, Russell Blackburn was the toughest cowboy in Texas. But she was seeing a good man underneath all that roughness, and the thought was a little scary. As you'd expect, news about the showdown with Jasper Holly spread like a prairie fire. By noon, Tabitha had heard about 5 different versions of the story, even from young Charlie. He showed up pretending to fix a window, but he was really there to spill the beans. They're saying Mr. Blackburn faced down 6 men with nothing but his fists, Charlie said with wide eyes. Knocked 2 of them out cold and sent the others running for the hills. I'm sure the story has grown a bit, Tabitha said gently, thinking of Russell's bruises. Maybe, Charlie admitted, but everyone is talking about how he ended the rustling without a single shot. Old man Holly promised his boys will leave Montgomery's cattle alone from now on. And in return, Mr. Blackburn is going to talk to Montgomery about the water rights on Holly's north pasture. This was brand new information to Tabitha. He made a deal? He never said a word about that to me. Charlie grinned. That's Mr. Blackburn for you, does the hard work without the talk. The children were so full of questions, Tabitha decided to change the lesson. She used Russell's way of handling things as an example of settling a dispute. Mr. Blackburn could have gone in there ready for a fight, she explained. Instead, he chose to talk first to understand the other man's problem. But he still got hurt, Billy pointed out. Yes, and that is an important lesson. Sometimes doing the right thing comes at a price. Is that why you came all the way to Texas? Emma asked out of the blue. The question surprised Tabitha. In a way, she finally admitted. And do you belong here? Emma pressed on. Tabitha thought of the wide-open skies and Russell. I'm beginning to think I might, she said softly. That evening, Russell did not join them for dinner. Mrs. Garcia said he was eating with the men, planning patrols for the northern border. Tabitha told herself not to be disappointed, knowing he had responsibilities. Later, she sat on the porch under a spectacular show of stars. A creaking floorboard let her know she was not alone. She turned to see Russell. I didn't mean to disturb you, he said. You didn't, she answered, motioning to the empty chair. Please join me. He sat down carefully, his body still stiff from the fight. How are your ribs? She asked gently. Better, thanks to your care. That salve really helped. They sat in a comfortable quiet for a few moments. I heard you reached an agreement with the Hollies, she said, breaking the silence. Russell glanced at her before looking back at the star-filled schema. Well, Holly's people had a right to be upset. Montgomery bought... He settled back in his chair, stretching out his long legs. That ointment helped. What is in it? Just some herbs Mrs. Garcia gave me. I only put it on. They sat quietly for a bit. All you could hear were the night critters and the creak of her porch swing. I heard you made a deal. she finally said. Charlie said it was about water rights with the Holly place. Russell looked over at her, then back at the starry sky. The Holly family had a right to be angry. His land, when Holly was down on his luck, and paid far less than it was worth. Then he cut off the creek that watered Holly's pasture. It was just shy of illegal, but it sure wasn't right. And you reckon Montgomery will agree to give the water back? He will if he wants his cattle left alone for good. Russell's voice was firm. I made it clear to Holly that any more thieving would be met with trouble. But I also gave my word I'd fight for his water rights. It's the only fair way. Well, that's mighty diplomatic, considering your reputation, Tabitha pointed out. He looked over at her, a hint of a smile in his eyes. You mean for the meanest cowboy in all of Texas? She felt her face flush. I never said that. You didn't have to. It's what Montgomery tells anyone who'll listen. He shrugged and winced a little. That reputation can be useful sometimes. Makes folks think twice. But it is not who you really are, Tabitha said, more as a fact than a question. Russell stared up at the stars. Parts of it are true, he finally said. I've done things I am not proud of. Been harder than I had to be, but no, it's not the whole picture. Then what is the whole truth, she asked him quietly. He looked at her again, his face hard to read in the dark. Why do you want to know, Titha? You still on a mission to civilize me? The question stung because it held some truth. Maybe at first, she admitted, but now I just want to understand you. Because she paused, trying to sort out her feelings for this complicated man. Because I care about you and the children and this place. Russell searched her face and saw she meant it. The whole truth, he started slowly, is that I learned early on that the world is a hard place. It favors the strong, so I chose to be strong. But strength without purpose is just being cruel. For years, I've been trying to find that balance, to be tough enough for this land, but not lose sight of what really matters. And what matters to you, Tabitha asked, leaning in. Justice, loyalty, keeping my word. He paused, and protecting those who need it, like Emma and Billy. Just like them, he agreed. They deserve better than being used in Montgomery's schemes. You truly do love them, Tabitha said softly. They're the closest thing I have to family, Russell said. Watching them heal and grow, it has given me a purpose I never knew I needed. The simple truth in his voice moved her. This was the real Russell Blackburn. Not a scary foreman, but a man with a big heart who found his way by caring for 2 orphans. They love you too, she said. Those kids need a steady hand. Anyone can see that, he said, his voice getting rough. A real home, where they're wanted. That is why I cannot let Montgomery send them off. We will not let that happen, Tabitha said, reaching for his hand on the chair. I promise. Russell looked at her hand, then turned his own palm up, his calloused hand covering hers. Thank you, he said simply, and they sat there for a spell. A true connection was forming right there between them. Tabitha felt the warmth of his skin and the gentle strength in his touch, which surprised her. Finally, he let go and stood. It is getting late, he said, his voice gruff again. You need your rest. Tabitha stood up too, suddenly feeling shy. Yes, I suppose I do. He walked her to the door. At the doorway, he paused, looking down at her in a way that made her heart skip. Good night, Tabitha, he said, his deep voice like a soft rumble. Good night, Russell, she whispered. As she went upstairs, she knew with a sudden jolt she was falling in love with Russell Blackburn, who was not so mean after all. The thought was both wonderful and terrifying all at once. It was terrifying because she had no idea if he could ever feel the same. Russell was a man who kept his feelings locked away, and she was still, in many ways, a stranger here. Just a school teacher from Boston on the Texas frontier. But as she got ready for bed, Tabitha hoped for the very first time that she might find a permanent home out here under the big Texas sky, beside a man who was so much more than his reputation. But the next morning brought trouble. Sellers Montgomery returned home, a full week ahead of time. Tabitha was with the children in the schoolroom when she heard the commotion. Through the window, she saw him get off his horse, his face like a thundercloud, barking orders. Is Uncle Sellers mad? Emma asked, peeking around Tabitha. I'm not sure, sweetie, Tabitha answered, though he certainly looked agitated. Let us continue with our lesson. I am sure he will tell us if anything is important. But it was impossible to concentrate. Even Billy kept glancing at the door, looking worried. After 30 minutes of getting nowhere, Tabitha closed the books for the morning. Why don't we go outside for a bit, she suggested. Those butterfly cocoons we have been watching should be about ready to open. The children agreed in a heartbeat, glad to leave the tense room. The heavy peace of the house was shattered by shouting from Montgomery's study. She could not make out the words, but the anger was clear, and one voice was Russell's. They're fussing again, Emma whispered, her little face all worried. It is just grown-up talk, darling, Tabitha said, though her own stomach was in knots. Come on, let's go check on those butterflies of yours. Outside, they watched two monarch butterflies break free, and the tension faded for a little while. Tabitha was telling them about the butterfly's long journey when she saw Russell striding toward the stables, his face a thundercloud. Miss Vance, he called, changing course. Could I have a word? Of course, she said, her heart sinking. Y'all keep watch. I will be right back. She moved away with Russell. What on earth has happened? She asked. Montgomery's back, he said grimly. He received a letter from that school in San Antonio. They have agreed to take Emma and Billy at the start of next month. Next month, Tabitha gasped. But that is barely 4 weeks away. He was going to wait until you and I started speaking up for them. Now he is determined to send them off, says they are getting wrong ideas. He means from you, Tabitha understood. And from you, Russell added, his gaze direct. He does not like that you are taking the my side in this. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Is he dismissing me? Not yet, but he made it plain that your job depends on you playing along. She glanced back at the kids who were so gently releasing the new butterflies. The thought of them being sent to a cold boarding school just broke her heart. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice firm. He asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. You would risk your position? Of course I would, Tabitha said. Those children belong here, with people who care. He looked at her with new admiration. Thank you, he said. Then he got a thoughtful look. There might be a way. You see, Montgomery is not their legal guardian. This was news to her. But I thought he has been acting as their guardian? The paperwork was never completed. He was supposed to file it, but he just put it off. Russell lowered his voice. Their father's will named me as guardian, not Montgomery. Well, it seems Montgomery just happened to forget that part when he brought the kids out here. So by law, you've got a better claim to be their guardian than he does. If I can get my hands on that will? Yes, sir. The only trouble is Montgomery has the paper, and he is not about to just hand it over. Tabitha's mind started spinning. There had to be another copy somewhere, probably with the lawyer who wrote it up, a fella named James Forrester in San Antonio, Russell confirmed. But I can't just up and leave the ranch, not with these cattle rustlers still causing trouble. I can go, Tabitha said, almost before she thought it through. I could catch the stagecoach to San Antonio tomorrow, talk to Mr. Forrester, and be back in 3 days. Russell just stared at her, clearly surprised by her offer. You would do that? I surely would, she said, her voice full of purpose. For the children. She paused, then said a little softer, and for you. Their eyes locked, and a powerful feeling passed right between them. Something they both felt, but had not yet put a name to. After a long, quiet moment, Russell finally nodded. All right, but you are not going by yourself. That is a long, hard road, and San Antonio can be a tough place for a woman alone. He thought for a second. Charlie can go with you. He's a good kid, and Montgomery will not think twice about him being gone like he would me. What do we tell Mr. Montgomery is the reason for my trip? Most of the truth, Russell said, that you need to buy more books and things to help the children with their lessons. He will be all for anything that makes them look better for that fancy school. And when you get back with a copy of that will, Russell's face grew hard as stone. That is, when we will bring in a lawyer if we have to. Montgomery cares more about his good name than anything. He will not want a public fight in court that he knows he might lose. The plan had its risks, but Tabitha did not see any other way. All right, I will go tell Mrs. Garcia to get me ready for the trip. Russell gently took her arm before she could walk away. Tabitha, he said, his voice low and serious. Thank you. I know this is a whole lot to ask. It is the right thing to do, she answered simply. Then, feeling a little brave, she added, besides, I am finding I have a few good reasons for wanting to stay right here at this ranch. A slow smile spread across Russell's face, making him look a whole lot better despite the bruises. Oh, is that right? It is, she said, and she could feel her face getting warm as he looked at her. Well then, he said, letting go of her arm but still holding her gaze, I reckon we both have a good reason to see this thing through. With that little mystery of a comment, he nodded toward the children and headed for the stables, leaving Tabitha to wonder what he meant, and to hope it meant exactly what she thought it did. That night, she told Montgomery her plan to go to San Antonio for school supplies. She was relieved when he not only agreed but seemed happy about it. A fine idea, Miss Vance, he said, stroking his mustache. The children ought to have the best when they start at St. Mary's Academy. While you are in town, you might as well stop in and see Headmaster Phillips. I already sent a letter telling him all about how you are getting Emma and Billy ready for his school. Of course, Tabitha said, she said smoothly, though her stomach was in knots. I would be happy to meet with him. Montgomery pulled a small, clinking pouch from his desk. This is for your expenses, and a little extra for yourself. San Antonio has some fine shops, you know. That is mighty generous, Mr. Montgomery, Tabitha said, feeling guilty about her secret mission. Not at all. You have done well with the children, despite some questionable influences. I trust you now understand why they cannot get too attached to this ranch. I understand your position, Tabitha replied carefully, but I believe children need stability. Montgomery just waved a hand. Oh, children are adaptable. Emma and Billy will do just fine at St. Mary's. Their future is what matters. I am counting on your full support in this, Miss Vance. Their time here was temporary. And my time here was temporary too, I suppose. Tabitha could not help but ask. Not necessarily, Montgomery said, surprising her. There could be a place for you in San Antonio. The children will need a familiar face while they get settled. This was a new wrinkle. A month ago, that offer would have been a lifeline. Now the city held no appeal. That is very kind, she said, not giving a real answer. I will certainly think on it. You do that, Montgomery said, dismissing her. The stage leaves at 8 tomorrow morning. Charlie will ride along with you, just as Blackburn suggested. A sensible move. So he knew about Charlie. Tabitha wondered what else the man suspected. The journey to San Antonio was long and the stagecoach ride was rough. Under that hot Texas sun, Charlie proved to be a good companion, always making sure she was comfortable. He kept up a cheerful conversation that made the long miles go by faster. They arrived late the next day and checked into a modest hotel downtown. San Antonio was much bigger and busier than Tabitha had ever imagined. It was a real mix of cultures, with American, Mexican, and German voices all around them. First thing in the morning, we need to find Mr. Forrester's office, Tabitha told Charlie. The sooner we get the information, the sooner we can head back to the ranch. Charlie agreed, though he looked a little disappointed. I thought you might want to see the city. It has a lot of history here, you know. The Alamo and everything. Perhaps if we have time afterward, Tabitha said gently. But our mission has to come first. The next morning, they found the law offices of Forrester and Wells in a fine brick building. They found the lawyer's office on a main street in San Antonio. Tabitha wore her best suit, hoping to make a good impression. James Forrester was a dignified man in his 60s with a full head of silver hair. He had sharp, dark eyes that missed nothing. He listened closely as Tabitha explained her situation. She told him about the ranch and her deep concern for the children. So you see, Mr. Forrester, she finished, we believe the will names Mr. Blackburn as guardian, but Mr. Montgomery is holding the document. And he doesn't seem to want to follow its instructions. Forrester touched his fingers together, watching her. He considered her words. Miss Vance, I understand your concern, but I'm afraid I cannot simply tell you what is in a client's will. That would be a professional mistake. Tabitha's heart sank. I see, but however, the lawyer continued, I can confirm or deny information you already believe to be true. For instance, if you were to ask me a question about whether Captain Thomas Wallace named Russell Blackburn as the guardian for his children, I could answer that. Tabitha and Charlie shared a quick, hopeful look. Did Captain Wallace name Russell Blackburn as the children's guardian? She asked directly. Yes, he did, Forrester confirmed. Celia Montgomery was named as an alternate, but only if Mr. Blackburn couldn't do it. Or was unwilling, he added. Can Mr. Blackburn get a copy of that will? Charlie asked. The original is with Mr. Montgomery as the executor, Forrester explained. But yes, I do have a copy right here. I cannot give it to you without a court order, however. But if Mr. Blackburn were to ask the court for guardianship, citing that will, I would have to provide my copy as evidence. Relief washed over Tabitha. So if Russell comes here and files a petition, he has a very strong legal claim? Extremely strong, Forrester confirmed. Captain Wallace was very clear. He and Mr. Blackburn served in the war together. They built a powerful bond of trust. The captain knew Mr. Blackburn would provide the right kind of life. He wanted his children to be practical, honorable, and connected to the land. That is exactly what Russell wants, Tabitha said earnestly. He cares an awful lot for Emma and Billy. He is teaching them about ranching, but he also cares about their schooling. He just doesn't want them sent away. Not to a boarding school, not while they are still hurting from losing their parents. Forrester watched her. His eyes were searching. You seem to care a great deal about this, Miss Vance. Is it more than your job? Tabitha hesitated, not knowing what to say. How could she explain all the complicated feelings that had pushed her to make this journey? Her love for the children, her belief they needed help, and her growing feelings for Russell. It was all true, but none of it was the whole story. Because it's what's right, she finally said. Those children, Emma and Billy, deserve to be raised in a home where they are loved for who they are, not what they stand for. And Russell Blackburn, for all his rough ways, loves those kids like they were his own blood. He would lay down his life for them in a second. Forrester nodded, slowly. I believe you, and I reckon Captain Wallace would want you fighting for them. He reached for a paper and started to write. I can't give you a copy of the will, but I can give you a letter that confirms it. Russell Blackburn can use this letter to start things with the court if he has to. Oh, thank you, Tabitha said. This will change everything. They left the office, the letter tucked away safe. Charlie grinned at her. Well, that went better than we hoped. How about we see a bit of San Antonio? Tabitha was tempted. The long journey had worn her out, and she dreaded the ride back. Besides, she had promised to buy school supplies to keep up their story. Just a few hours, she agreed. We need to stop by a bookshop for the supplies, I promised. Maybe we can see the Alamo, then catch that afternoon stage back home. They spent a nice few hours in the city. Charlie was a good guide since he had been there before. They bought books and paper, visited the historic Alamo, and even had a proper meal before heading back to the stage station. The journey back felt endless. Tabitha's mind was just buzzing with plans and worries. How would Montgomery take the news? Would he put up a fight against Russell's claim? And what would all this mean for her job? By the time they finally reached the ranch, Tabitha was bone-tired but ready. Charlie helped her down, careful with their bags. Should I take these supplies on up to the house, Miss Vance? He asked. Yes, please, she answered. And Charlie, thank you. I truly could not have done this without you. He got a little shy. Just doing what Mr. Blackburn asked, ma'am. He is a good man, even if he hides it. Yes, Tabitha agreed quietly. I believe he is. As Charlie headed off with the packages, Tabitha went to the stables, figuring that is where she would find Russell this time of day. She found him in the tack room, mending a bridle with his usual careful hands. He looked up when she walked in, his eyes sharp. You are back. So, how did it go? Tabitha closed the door for privacy. We did it, Mr. Forrester confirmed Captain Wallace named you guardian. He could not give us a copy of the will without a court order, but he did something else. He wrote this letter confirming everything. She pulled it from her bag and handed it to him. He said you can use this to file with the court. Russell took the letter and began to read it slowly. His face was unreadable, but when he looked up, his eyes had a fire that took Tabitha's breath. This changes it all, he said quietly. And now I can fight for them the right way, with the law on our side. Mr. Forrester was sure you would have a strong case, Tabitha added. He said the captain's wishes were crystal clear. Russell folded the letter with care and tucked it in the pocket over his heart. Thomas knew what he wanted for his kids. A life on this land, with honest work and real values. He looked straight at Tabitha. Not some fancy school that would teach them to be ashamed of their home. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Not go after Montgomery. Not yet," Russell said. "First, I need to talk to Judge Wilson. He is a fair and respected man in this county. If he is with me, Montgomery will have a real fight on his hands. Should we tell the children?" Russell thought a moment. "Not everything, but we ought to prepare them that things might be changing. Let them know, no matter what, they will not be separated from the folks who love them." Tabitha nodded, feeling a wave of relief. "That is smart. They have been on edge since he returned. They can feel the tension." Russell then studied her face, seeing how tired she was from the trip. "You look worn out," he said, his voice softening. "You ought to get some rest." "I am fine," she said, though she was bone-tired. "There is just too much to get done." "It can wait till morning," Russell insisted. "You did more than enough, bringing this letter back to us." "I will not forget it." The way he spoke her name made her heart flutter. "I did it for the children," she said softly. "And for you." He then took a step closer. She could feel the warmth from him. "Why?" he whispered. "Why risk so much for me?" Tabitha met his gaze, finding a new kind of courage. "Because I care about you, Russell. More than I ought to, maybe." He stood perfectly still, just searching her eyes. Then so gently he raised a calloused hand and touched her cheek. "Tabitha," he breathed, "you deserve better than a scarred-up, difficult man like me." "I get to choose for myself," she answered, leaning into his touch. "And I choose you." A rare, true smile spread across his face. "Well then, you are either mighty brave or a little bit foolish." "Maybe I am both," she replied with a smile of her own. The air between them felt alive. She thought for sure he would kiss her, but he slowly lowered his hand. "Not here," he said with regret. "Not like this. You deserve better than a stolen moment in a tack room." And Tabitha understood. Russell Blackburn, for all his reputation, was a man of honor. He would do this the right way. "I ought to get to the house," she said, even though leaving was the last thing on her mind. "Montgomery is expecting a report on my trip to San Antonio." Russell simply nodded. "Be careful," he warned. "Don't give him any reason to suspect what we're really doing." "I won't," she promised. "What about you? When will you see Judge Wilson?" "Tomorrow," he said. "The sooner we start, the better." Montgomery's already making plans to send the children away. They knew they had to act fast. With that understanding, Tabitha headed for the main house. Russell went back to his work, but something real had just passed between them. It was a feeling too strong to ignore, a promise to fight for the family they both loved. As Tabitha got closer, she saw Montgomery on the porch, watching her with suspicious eyes. She wondered how long he'd been standing there, if he'd seen her come from the stables. Did he guess why she was really back? She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She walked up the steps, ready to keep up the act just a little while longer. She knew the truth would come out soon, and when it did, she would be standing right by Russell's side. Montgomery was waiting in the parlor with a glass of whiskey and a calculating look. When she walked in, he motioned for her to sit. "Welcome back, Miss Vance." His tone was smooth as butter. "I trust your trip went well." "Very well," Tabitha replied calmly. "I bought some excellent history and math books, along with some good paper and pencils. Charlie is bringing it all in now." "Splendid," Montgomery said, but his eyes were cold. "And did you visit Headmaster Phillips like I asked?" Tabitha was ready for that question. "I did, but he was at a conference in Austin. His secretary was very helpful, though. She gave me all the school information." Montgomery nodded, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "A pity you missed him." "The children will learn a lot from him." He paused, then added, "I saw you coming from the stables." He had been watching her. Tabitha struggled to keep her cool. "I was just thanking Charlie for his help on the trip." "He was a great help. But Charlie mentioned you also stopped at a law office in town." Montgomery's gaze grew sharp. "Any particular reason for that?" Her heart jumped into her throat. She realized he must have questioned Charlie the second they got back. "Yes, actually, I was asking about getting my teaching credentials recognized here in Texas. If I'm to continue teaching, I figured it was smart to understand the legal side of things." Well, her story was believable enough, and Montgomery couldn't rightly prove it was a lie. He just stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for any hint she was fibbing. A smart move, he finally said, though his voice told her he wasn't buying it. Still a bit early to be making such plans, considering your job here is just temporary. A person should always plan for the future, Tabitha said calmly, even the uncertain ones. He gave her a tight little smile. I suppose so. He set his glass down and stood up. Well, I'll let you get your rest. We'll talk about the new school supplies tomorrow. The children will surely be glad to see you. They have been mighty down in the dumps without you. I've missed them something fierce, too, Tabitha said honestly. Good night, Mr. Montgomery. She hurried to her room, feeling a wave of relief. She knew he was suspicious, but she also knew he couldn't prove a thing. For now, that was good enough. The very next morning, Russell rode into town at dawn to go see Judge Wilson. Tabitha did her best to keep the children focused on their lessons, but her mind kept drifting, wondering how that meeting was going. She found out just after noon when the sound of horses brought everyone to the schoolhouse window. Russell was riding back, and with him was an older gentleman in a formal black coat, who Tabitha figured was Judge Wilson. A third younger man followed them, carrying a leather case for documents. Who's that with Mr. Blackburn? Emma asked, with her face pressed against the glass. I'm not sure, honey, Tabitha said, though she had a pretty good idea. Come on now, let's get back to our lesson. But nobody could concentrate. Even Tabitha's mind wandered as she listened for noises from downstairs. Before long, she heard Montgomery's voice, raised and angry, answered by the calm voices of Russell and the other man. Miss Vance, Mrs. Garcia called from the doorway, her face full of worry. You are needed down in the study. The children are to stay put. What is happening? Billy asked as Tabitha stood up. Is Uncle Cecil throwing a fit again? Everything is going to be just fine, she promised him, praying she was right. Y'all continue with your books while I am gone. I will be back in a little while. The air in Montgomery's study was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Montgomery stood behind his desk, his face all red and blotchy with anger. Russell stood opposite, looking as cool as a cucumber, but ready for anything. And between them sat Judge Wilson, a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair who just radiated authority. The young fellow with the document case sat off to the side, his pen ready. He was a court clerk, there to write it all down. Ah, Miss Vance, Montgomery said, his voice crackling with rage. How nice of you to join us. Maybe you can tell us about your part in this little backstabbing scheme. Before Tabitha could get a word out, Judge Wilson raised a hand. Let's keep a civil tongue in our heads, Mr. Montgomery. Miss Vance, please, have a seat. Here to settle the legal guardianship for the children, Emma and William Wallace. Tabitha took her seat, looking to Russell, who gave her a nod that said everything would be all right. The judge spoke plainly. Captain Wallace's will is crystal clear. He chose Russell Blackburn to be the guardian. Silas Montgomery was only the backup, in case Mr. Blackburn couldn't do it. But that will was never properly filed, Montgomery argued sharply. It wasn't put before the court when my sister passed. An oversight we are fixing right now, Judge Wilson said calmly. The will is valid, Mr. Montgomery. We have a certified copy and a letter confirming Captain Wallace was in his right mind when he stated his wishes. This is ridiculous, Montgomery fumed. Blackburn is a simple ranch foreman, not a guardian for these children. He has no standing, no greedy hands in their inheritance. Russell cut in, his voice low and steady. Is that your real worry, Montgomery? That you'll lose control of Thomas's land if I am their guardian? Montgomery's face turned beet red. How dare you suggest such a thing? It is not a suggestion, Russell said. It is the simple truth. You have been using their money for your own gain, but Thomas knew exactly the kind of man you are. Tabitha spoke up then, trying to cool the air. Judge Wilson, what truly matters is what is best for Emma and Billy. They just need some stability and love right now. The judge nodded. Well said, Miss Vance, that is the most important thing to this court. He then faced Montgomery. Sir, I hear you have plans to send the children away to boarding school. St. Mary's Academy is the finest school in all of Texas, Montgomery said with a stiff back. They'll get a better education there than they ever could on some dusty ranch. And yet it seems they are doing just fine here, Judge Wilson pointed out. Miss Vance, you are their teacher. Tell me how the children are really doing. Tabitha took a steadying breath. Emma and Billy are smart, happy children who are learning so much every single day. They do well in their books, but they are also learning about real life, about the ranch, and how to be good people. Most of all, they are happy. They have bonded with everyone here, especially with Mr. Blackburn. "And you feel this bond is good for them?" the judge asked, leaning forward. "Yes, sir, I do," Tabitha said without a doubt in her voice. After losing their folks, they need an adult they can trust. Mr. Blackburn gives them that. He provides that steady hand and support. He teaches them good values that you just cannot learn in a classroom. Provide. Honesty, hard work, and kindness. Montgomery just scoffed at that. Blackburn is not exactly a gentleman. The man is known for being rough and cussing a bit, and you think that is a good influence? Well, Mr. Blackburn is exactly what those children need, Tabitha shot back, her voice getting stronger. A man who will always put them first. He understands their sorrow because he has had his own. He sees what they can be and encourages it. He does not try to change who they are. She looked Montgomery straight in the eye, and he loves them. He loves them, Mr. Montgomery, for who they are right now, not for who they might become. A quiet fell over the room. Russell was looking at her in a way that made her heart jump. It was respect, thanks, and something much deeper. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. "That was well said, Miss Vance. Your opinion matters since you work with the children all every day," he told the clerk. "Make sure you get all of that down." "This is ridiculous," Montgomery sputtered. "The governess is biased. She and Blackburn have been plotting behind my back." "That is enough, Montgomery." Russell's voice was quiet. "This is not about us. It is about what Emma and Billy's father wanted for them." The judge nodded. "That is right. After hearing everything, I am going to honor Captain Wallace's wishes. Mr. Blackburn seems to be providing good care for the children, with Miss Vance's professional help." He gave Montgomery a hard look. "Unless you can show me some real proof that Mr. Blackburn is unfit, I will be siding with him." Montgomery looked like all the air had gone out of him. The anger left him, replaced by scheming. "And what about the financial arrangements? The children's inheritance will be properly managed, with regular reports to this court." Judge Wilson replied, "Captain Wallace's will set up a trust for that very reason. You and Mr. Blackburn are in charge of it together. That arrangement will stand." This seemed to calm Montgomery some. "I see. And where will they live?" "This is my ranch." "I bought some land," Russell said, surprising them both. "It is the old Kendall place, right next to your north pasture. 500 acres, good water, and a solid house. The sale will be final next week." Tabitha was stunned. "When did you do that?" "I've been saving for years," Russell explained, a hint of pride in his voice. "I was going to tell you when it was official." Judge Wilson nodded, pleased. "Well, that settles the matter of where they will live. The children will live with Mr. Blackburn on his property and continue their schooling." He then turned to Tabitha. "Miss Vance, are you willing to stay on as governess in this new situation?" Tabitha felt a wave of pure joy. "Yes, Your Honor. I would be more than willing." "Excellent. Then unless there are any more objections," the judge looked at Montgomery, who just pressed his lips together, but sat in silence. "I'll issue the official guardianship papers tomorrow. Mr. Blackburn, be in my office at 10 o'clock sharp to sign everything." And just like that, the meeting was over. Montgomery went quiet as a stone, refusing to look at Russell or Tabitha. Judge Wilson gathered his things, and Russell walked him out the door. That left Tabitha all alone with Montgomery. For a long moment, the room was dead quiet. Then he looked up, his face cold. "You surely do surprise me, Miss Vance. I figured you were an ambitious woman." "Oh, I am," Tabitha said calmly, "but what I want has changed since I came to Texas." A cold smile touched his lips. "I see that. Well, I won't stand in your way, but you're choosing a hard life. Russell Blackburn might seem all romantic now with his rough cowboy charm, but men like that don't ever really change. The darkness inside him doesn't just go away. It won't disappear just because a good woman wishes it would," he finished. Tabitha met his stare. "I'm not trying to change him, Mr. Montgomery. I value him for who he is. Maybe you should try accepting people for who they are, instead of who you want them to be." Montgomery's face hardened. "You'll regret this, Miss Vance. You mark my words." I don't think I will, she said with a quiet confidence. Now, I need to get back to the children. She left him standing there among all his fancy things, a man rich in everything but happiness. As she walked up the stairs, she just felt a wave of relief. A new future was starting to unfold. It was a future she never could have dreamed of when she first set foot on the Montgomery Ranch. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the one her heart had chosen for her. Russell was waiting for her on the landing, standing tall against the light from the window. He took her hand and led her to a quiet corner. "You were magnificent down there," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Standing up to that man for me. I don't have the words to thank you." "Oh, you don't need to thank me, Russell," she said softly. "I just told the truth." "It was more than that," he insisted. His usually guarded eyes were open and honest. "You have seen the absolute worst of me, my temper, my stubborn pride. And somehow you still believe in me. That's a gift I never expected, especially from a lady from Boston." Tabitha smiled at that. "I am not so refined, Russell. And Boston feels a world away." "Do you miss it?" he asked, watching her closely. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I miss a few things. But I don't miss the person I was back there. I see now that I wasn't whole. I didn't even know it until I came here." His big, calloused hand came up to gently cup her cheek. "I feel like I've found a part of me I never knew was missing," she said. "Right here, with the children and with you." His hard expression just melted away, and the stern lines around his face softened with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Tabitha Vance," he said, his voice like a warm touch. "I never thought I would find someone like you. Never figured a fine woman like you would ever look twice at a rough man like me." "Then you did not give either of us enough credit," she answered, putting her hand over his. They stood there, connected. The air between them felt alive with what could be. Then, ever so gently, Russell leaned in. He brushed his lips against hers. It was a question, a gentle promise. Tabitha answered by rising up on her toes. She put a hand on his neck and kissed him back with all her heart. It was a perfect moment, full of a tender passion. This was a true beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Russell rested his forehead against hers, his breath coming in short. "I should have done that a long, long time ago," he whispered. "Well, better late than never," she teased. He chuckled, a low rumble she felt right through her. "I reckon so." He straightened up. "We need to go tell the children. They deserve to know they have a home." "Yes," Tabitha agreed warmly. "They will be so very happy." Hand in hand, they walked off to share the good news. The next few weeks flew by in a happy blur of things to do. Russell officially became the children's guardian. The papers were all signed and settled right there in Judge Wilson's courtroom. Montgomery, you could tell he was not pleased, but he kept it civil. He mostly stayed away from the ranch. The deal for the Kendall property was done, and Russell got to work making it a home. The house was solid but had been let go. It was going to need a lot of work. But the ranch hands, who had all grown mighty fond of Emma and Billy, gave their own time to help fix it up. Tabitha spent her days teaching the children and helping make plans for their new home. She was surprised to find how much she loved creating a real home, something she had never thought about back in Boston. And the children, they were just thrilled with everything that was happening. Knowing they were staying in Texas with Russell and Tabitha brought a new light to their faces. They jumped right into helping with all the preparations for the big move. They had an opinion on everything, from who got which room to where the new garden ought to be. "Are you going to live with us at the new house, Miss Vance?" Emma asked one day. Tabitha paused for a moment. She and Russell had not quite talked about that part of the plan. They had only talked about her staying on as the children's teacher. "I will certainly be your teacher," she said carefully, "but we have not settled all the little details just yet. That is mighty perceptive for a girl of 8. But you love Mr. Blackburn, and we can all see he loves you." Tabitha felt her face get warm. "Grown-up relationships are complicated, Emma." The girl just shook her head. "If you love someone and they love you, you should be together. That is what my mama always said." Tabitha had to smile at that. "Your mama was a wise woman, but there are proper ways to do things, especially when children are part of it," she added. Emma rolled her eyes. Grown-ups always make everything harder than it has to be. Tabitha could not help but laugh. Well, maybe you are right about that. Now, which book should we take to the new house? That night, she saw Russell on the porch looking over drawings by the light of a lamp. He looked up and gave her that soft smile he saved only for her. The children are finally asleep, she told him. She sat down next to him. They are so excited about moving, they could hardly calm down. I do not blame them, Russell said. He put his drawings aside. It is a big change, but a good one. The very best, Tabitha said. They are thrilled to be staying with you, although Emma did ask a very direct question about us. Russell raised an eyebrow. Did she now, and what did you tell her? That the details were not settled yet. Which is the truth, is it not? He took her hand, his touch sending a little shiver up her arm. That is only because I wanted to be sure of your feelings first. I believe I have made my feelings quite clear, she said, trying to sound formal, but a smile gave her away. That you have, Miss Vance Vihoys. His blue eyes were suddenly serious. But like you said, there is a proper way to do things. You have reminded me of that more than once. With that, he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. Tabitha's breath caught in her throat as he opened it. Inside was a beautiful ring with a single pearl. It was my mother's, Russell said, his voice thick with emotion. The only thing of hers I managed to hold on to through all my years of wandering. I never thought I would have a reason to give it to anyone. He took her hand again, his touch so gentle. Tabitha Vance, you came to Texas to tame the meanest cowboy around. And instead you taught him what it means to love. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? And be a mother to Emma and Billy? Tears of joy welled up in Tabitha's eyes. Yes, she whispered, her voice growing stronger. Yes, Russell. Nothing would make me happier. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her to her feet and into his arms. Their kiss was a promise of their new life to come. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers in that way she loved. We will have to wait just a little bit to marry, he said. The house is not quite ready yet. To do before winter. I don't mind waiting a little, Tabitha told him, long as we're together. Together, he repeated softly. Always, Titha. That is my promise to you. As they stood there in the Texas twilight with their arms wrapped around each other, Tabitha thought about the wild journey that had led her to this very moment. She'd come out west expecting to civilize a brute of a man. Instead, she found a man of character behind that fearsome reputation. A man who woke up feelings inside her she never knew she had. He showed her a love that was bigger than where they came from, or what folks expected. Some might still call Russell Blackburn the meanest cowboy in Texas. But to Tabitha, Emma, and Billy, he was just the best man they knew. Honest, loyal, and with a love as big as the Texas sky. Their wedding happened on a clear October day when the hill country was a blaze of fall colors. Right at the new house that Russell had worked so hard to get ready. The simple homestead on a little hill was now a welcoming home, with fresh paint and new curtains in all the windows. Judge Wilson married them were with Emma as maid of honor and Billy as Russell's best man. Mrs. Garcia, Charlie, and the ranch hands were all there along with neighbors. Even Montgomery made an appearance, showing up late with fancy gifts, maybe as his way of making peace. Tabitha wore a beautiful ivory silk gown she ordered all the way from San Antonio. And Russell, he looked like a different man in a new black suit. He stood tall and spoke his vows in a voice so strong and sure. I, Russell James Blackburn, take you, Tabitha Ann Vance, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day on, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health till death do us part. This is my solemn vow. As Tabitha repeated those words, looking right into his eyes, she felt a deep sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, with him and these children. After the ceremony, they had a big feast under the oak trees, with some of the ranch hands playing fiddle and guitar. As the sun started to set, Russell led Tabitha in a dance. Are you happy, Mrs. Blackburn? He asked, holding her tight as they swayed. Completely, Mr. Blackburn, she answered, her heart feeling so full it might just bust. I'm still getting used to my new name, though. It suits you, he said with a warm smile. I don't deserve you taking my name. I disagree, she said. I am so proud to be your wife, Russell. Prouder than you know, than words can say. He pulled her in tight and gently brushed his lips against her forehead. That gentle touch from such a tough man still took her breath away. "I love you, Tabitha, more than I can ever say." "I love you too," she whispered back, "with my whole heart." The music played on under a beautiful, fiery Texas sunset. Tabitha looked around at her new family. She saw Emma and Billy dancing with pure joy. Miss Garcia served up plates of food while the younger folks started new friendships. This was her community. This was her family. This was finally her home. It was not the life she planned back in Boston, but Lord, it was so much better. It was richer and more meaningful than anything she could have dreamed up herself. And right in the center of it all was Russell, the toughest cowboy in Texas. A man who had shown his true strength not with his fists, but by opening his heart. He chose love over loneliness. As lanterns began to glow, Russell led her to the porch. On the steps of their new home, in the soft light, he took both of her hands in his. "I have been thinking," he said, his voice steady, "about what we are building here." "What is on your mind?" she asked. "I think this ranch should be more than for cattle. It ought to be a real home for children who do not have one," he said, watching her face. "Children just like Emma and Billy were. Kids who have lost their folks. There are too many little ones out there being raised by strangers. What they really need is a family." Her heart swelled with so much love for this man. His compassion was bigger than the whole state of Texas. "Russell, that is a wonderful idea," she said with a tear in her eye. "We have the land, and we have us. We can give them an education, practical skills, and most of all, a loving home." He looked so relieved. "So you would be willing to take on more children?" "More than willing," she assured him with a warm smile. "I was born to be a teacher. But this is bigger than that. This is building a real home for them." He pulled her into a hug. He held her like she was the most precious thing in the whole world. "Have I told you how remarkable you are, Tabitha Blackburn?" She smiled against his chest. "Not in the last hour." "Well, that is a mistake I need to fix," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "And I plan on fixing it every day for the rest of our lives." "I will hold you to that, Mr. Blackburn." She looked up into his eyes, and he gave her a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. Tabitha knew for certain her true home was not in some fancy room in Boston. It was right here under the big Texas sky, with a man whose rough hands held the kindest heart she'd ever known. As the years rolled on, the Blackburn Ranch became known all across Texas. It was famous not just for cattle, but for its school that welcomed children with nowhere else to go. With Tabitha leading the way, that little schoolhouse truly blossomed. She taught the children book smarts and the practical skills they'd need to build a good life. Russell, once feared as the meanest cowboy in Texas, became a deeply respected rancher. He was known for giving second chances to folks society had forgotten, treating them with dignity. Emma and Billy grew up to be strong and capable young adults. They were always secure, knowing they were loved for exactly who they were. Emma, with her sharp mind, went off to the university in Austin when she was good and ready. Billy, who shared Russell's love for the land, became his partner in running the whole operation. On those quiet evenings when the chores were all done, you'd find Tabitha and Russell on their porch. They would sit holding hands, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in fire and gold. "Did you ever imagine this kind of life?" Russell would sometimes ask, his voice soft. "Never," Tabitha would always answer honestly. "But now I can't imagine any other. This is where I was meant to be, with you and our family, under this endless sun." And Russell, the man who had once built walls around his heart, would draw his wife in close. He would thank whatever lucky star sent Tabitha to him. She didn't change him, but her love helped him become the good man he was always meant to be.